raise your hand, do whatever you want to do. We'll do a little bit of presenting, and then we'll engage in some conversation. And as much as you want to join us, we would be very happy to do that. And we can even connect you through Zoom and have you on the screen with us if you have a live question once we get going. Okay, I'll turn it over to Rhonda.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for changing the Great Resignation to the Great Alignment series. Today we're going to be talking about a mindset shift of largely focusing on performance to expand and include thinking about employee satisfaction. So we're going to share some interesting facts that people should know about what employee satisfaction means to the organization and to the employees, and how to incorporate both without sacrificing your time, energy, and authority to do that, as well as your daily job and the things you've been focusing on today, and some practical tips that you can do to improve employee satisfaction on your team. So this is a bi-weekly series, and we come to each topic with 4 different perspectives. One is culture and inclusion with Jay Marks, and he'll introduce himself in just a moment. Employee empowerment. So we have a third co-presenter, Andrea Pagnosi, who talks about career development and career choices and career empowerment. In the spirit of employee satisfaction, even though we aren't employed together, we partner together. Andrea is on vacation this week. So in the spirit of work-life balance, she's taking a bye this week and enjoying some time in the sun with family. And she'll be back again in 2 weeks when we pick up on our next topic, which we'll introduce at the end of this call. And I'm Rhonda Robinson, and I talk about retention and engagement. And then we have insights and Q&A that we welcome from you, because you are an important part of these interactions. You have a lot of great experience, some tips, best practices, maybe some questions, things that you're struggling with that you'd like to solve for on these calls. So again, I'm Rhonda Robinson. I am a certified professional in talent development and master performance consultant. I have a company called Retain My Team. What we do is in the name. How we do it is based in behavioral neuroscience. And these calls are not designed for us to sell you anything, but to share our insights and to try and give back to the community. And then my co-host, Jay, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Rhonda. Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Marks. I'm an organizational consultant. My focus is on senior teams, culture and inclusion, and growing companies, and helping them out with their growing pains. You know, lately, it's been my experience, and I think Rhonda, and if she were here, Andrea would say as well, that a lot of our recent conversations, both here in the LinkedIn Live and with clients, have been really about the complexities that have really come up in the last couple of years regarding culture, management teams, performance, relationships. So what our goal is here from week to week is to really get at some of those complexities and bring light and, as Rhonda said, all 4 perspectives, and very importantly, your perspective. So once we get rolling, keep that chat busy, and we'll get through our opening comments and get into our conversation ASAP, and Rhonda will help us do that.
All right. Yes. Along the way, if we could all try to keep ourselves on mute, that would be helpful to keep the background noise to a minimum. But please, if you have a question or a comment, you can either raise your hand, your proverbial hand, or just simply come off mute or put your comment in the chat. So what leaders are currently really focused on is executing business strategy that drives results. And, it doesn't come with, it comes with a lot of weight to have that, on your shoulders. And it's hard because it requires a lot of time and energy, and at times can be overwhelming and stressful. And especially now that we're heading into the recession, we're looking at resource utilization and rethinking strategies to kind of thwart perhaps what the recession might bring to us. Yet at the same time, employees have been and grow in their demand for employee satisfaction. And in light of what we just talked about, the current focus on strategy and putting up the numbers, getting results, it seems a little, or can seem a little thwarting to now add employee satisfaction to the mix of what we need to do at work. So some employers are asking, well, is this even necessary? I recently heard a CEO this week that said, oh, with the recession coming, with people with downsizing in certain organizations, employees should just be happy they have a job. And so when we say you need to come back into the office, they're just going to have to do it. Okay, that might be true, but is there a price to pay in terms of employee satisfaction and how that shows up in delivering on that strategy and the results? And we're going to talk about that. We have to keep in mind that people are complex, and you have the employees with their complexities and their demands, leaders being at max capacity, maybe not even equipped to think about, let alone act on employee satisfaction. And in the absence of training or knowing what to do, they're kind of relying on their gut in order to address it. Now, abdicating to HR, that's a start, but let's recognize that the relationship lies with the employee and their manager. And HR got a lot on their plate already. They're running at max capacity, trying to address the great resignation, the great reshuffle, however you want to term it, whichever term you want to put on it. And even companies that are making their revenue targets and milestones, they are paying a people tax when they don't address employee satisfaction. On one of our recent webinars, we talked about Amazon. Amazon was doing swimmingly well, especially through the pandemic. We all turned to Amazon for deliveries rather than going to stores with our masks on. Yet, what happened? They formed a union and demanded some different work conditions for their employees. So this is an example of how when you don't pay attention to the people tax, it shows up in your ability to execute on your strategy and potentially missing goals. And when people are dissatisfied, it will show up as turnover, as lower engagement, lower teamwork, lower productivity, lower innovation. And while no organization is immune from this messy people part, if you will, it's important that we need to quantify what that means to the bottom line. So the cost of turnover and disengagement is real. And if you look to Gallup, the 2019 workplace estimated that the cost of replacing an employee can range between 1/2 to 2 times their annual salary. So let's take an example of a 1,000 employee company that has hourly workers making $15 an hour. That equates to an average salary of $28,000 a year. And for just simplicity, let's say the rate of attrition is 20%. That means 200 people per year are leaving. So if we take that 200 people times half of their average salary to be conservative, you net a $2.8 million in turnover cost. It's not insignificant. Furthermore, and I often hear talking to various folks within organizations that they don't really have that much of a turnover cost or turnover problem, that it's probably about average for what they would expect. But one other thing that we need to think about and pay attention to, directly related to employee satisfaction, is the cost of disengagement. Again, Gallup, more recently in January of 2022, reports that 66% of workers have some degree of disengagement, with 16% of those actively disengaged. And the cost of disengagement is 18% of their salary. So if we take that same hourly worker pool and we calculate the cost of disengagement, it exceeds the cost of turnover. So employee satisfaction is directly related to the bottom line. And in particular, if you add these two numbers up, it's very easy to see that it's probably a lot more than that, especially if you have other things like a long time to fill positions, or if some of these positions are revenue generating. Well, let's take another example of salaried workers, another 1,000 employee company where they have an average salary of $100,000 a year. And their rate of attrition is lower, 15%. We still see a $7.5 million cost in turnover. But if we march that out in terms of disengagement, in this particular example, we're looking at almost $12 million in disengagement costs. So it seems like addressing employee satisfaction has been sort of a nice to do, because we're so focused on productivity. We're so focused on making the numbers, making the widget, putting up whatever our board expects from us that we have been measuring so far. But leaders are now recognizing that this people tax is costing them. When we look at the repercussions of not paying attention and it bleeding over into the bottom line, into productivity, missing goals, missing our targets, 78% of business leaders are now putting this as a top priority. Jay, what do you think about all this? You're on mute, Jay.
Thank you. Since you just threw out that 78% of leaders think this is a top concern, might be a good opportunity to get the chat going and find out what folks on the call think influences employee satisfaction. So whatever you're doing or maybe thinking about doing, we'd love to see some responses, some comments in the chat from you regarding what you think influences employee satisfaction, what you're seeing in your organization. Because certainly, when you think about all of the stuff we've been reading regarding people wanting meaning at work, people looking to their leaders for consistency, for transparency, for things of that nature. So some of the things like that would matter. Michelle says continuous feedback influences employee satisfaction. And we certainly know that if we're talking about both performance and having an understanding of what matters at work, feedback has a lot to do with that. Work-life balance, which we're trying to do here on our LinkedIn Live by giving Andrea some time away. But with Hilda says morale, overall culture, positive environment. So when we think about those as some of the things that really do influence satisfaction, and again, culture takes time and effort. Work-life balance, people see in various ways, certainly these days, in terms of what does flexibility mean? What does, if you're a hybrid, what does really balancing your time mean between being home and working? And even that idea of hybrid equity. So if we go to the next slide, and thanks for the people who responded in the chat, and we see some of the things that Again, we tend to know improve respectful, positive engagement. And Rhonda, you could do the click to the next one too. So here are the things that reduce employee satisfaction on one side, the things that cause increases in employee satisfaction. So it says surprising or not, I wouldn't think there's any real surprises here. But the thing, when we talk about shifting from performance to employee satisfaction, I think it's really important that we recognize that it's not a binary thing. It's not either performance or satisfaction. And that's one of the challenges that some managers are facing now is if they were pretty focused on performance, they didn't think so much about the employee satisfaction side of that equation. So part of contributing to performance are things like, transparency, letting people know what's going on. The respectful aspect of this is being able to deliver feedback. Somebody said, delivering feedback is an important way to increase employee satisfaction. My experience is it depends on how it's delivered. There are certainly managers I've felt better about that feedback from in my past, and some that every interaction was painful, as you probably know. I think on the other side, what tends to diminish employee satisfaction are this number, 80% lack of appreciation and empathy. And again, if you've done surveys in your organization, if you've followed Gallup or anybody else who puts out numbers over the years, lack of appreciation and lack of positive recognition is nothing new. I think that number has been low forever. And so to have that number here, that 80% of employees quit due to related issues, maybe the thing today is folks used to say, gee, I don't feel appreciated, and that's just part of being here. But now we see that more and more, and this is what the Great Resignation is about, people are leaving if they don't like how it feels at work. So one of the things for us to really think about is, how hard is it and what does it really take to at least show some appreciation and recognition? I think for a lot of folks, showing empathy is a different thing. It's a different skill set than just being able to show some appreciation and recognition. What does Andrew say? A lot of companies are measuring organizational commitment instead of employee engagement. So when we get through this in a minute, Andrew, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about that and what does organizational commitment really mean. Rhonda, could you flip? Okay, so we just said that this isn't an either or. A minute ago, asked the question, what are some of the things that contribute to employee satisfaction? So now if we want to go into the chat again with knowing that performance and satisfaction are not binary, but we want to do both. Does anybody have any comments, experience, examples of what you're doing to, essence, make both happen?
So Jay, Hilda said that they have a dedicated program or effort towards employee satisfaction. Hilda, we don't want to put you on the spot, but if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and letting us know what your organization's doing, that would be great.
Sure, yes, I definitely don't mind. So I'm in a sales role in a tech company. And so we have quarters where we establish goals, and at the conclusion of each quarter, just how we rate ourselves on whether we accomplished our goals or not. They also specifically ask us about how satisfied we are.
And is it that general, or is it, so is it open-ended in general, or are there specific things that they ask you about?
It's open-ended, and based on what your response is, you then have conversations with your manager about what you replied in your answer.
And it sounds like they have created a safe space to have those conversations. Not all people are comfortable putting it out there, knowing that they're going to have to follow up and talk about it with their manager. Can you give us some insights about how you've developed that? And this is Jay's areas of expertise, is psychological safety. So I'm always curious to learn more about that.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that the company overall really focuses on creating trust between team members, with leadership, with your managers. And so I think it starts from day one. And so my experience so far has been very positive. And so I think that if I was to have a concern, I would feel comfortable, sharing it in a very professional way in that quarterly evaluation, and then, speaking about it with my manager. But, it has been all along, all the way from like when I was interviewed to onboarding to, weekly meetings. And, by no far, I think, is the company perfect, but they do consciously work on creating trust.
Thanks, Hilda. And one of the things that you said is really so important is you said they started from day one, and that they, and you gave a number of examples that, your organization is doing kind of, as things continue to move forward. And one of the things people really want is consistency. So if we're talking about both, I think, balancing performance and satisfaction, that type of consistency is so important because it creates a sense of stability. It demonstrates an ongoing awareness and caring about sharing information, and to the extent that means including others, that's great. And it sounds like you're kind of changing things up over time as we move along. So I think you gave some great examples. So thank you for that. Maybe Andrew, if you want to come off of mute and you have a couple of comments, but I'd like to hear what you mean about organizational commitment, if you would share a little bit about that.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me speak on it here. It's definitely a lot of helpful content you guys are giving us all, so thank you. One thing that I've noticed, and this started more when I was doing research in graduate school, but we see a lot of companies that are focused on retention primarily. I know that's been a big focus for us. And even though engagement is important, at least in the academic research, what we're seeing is that retention, especially long-term retention beyond 10 years, is better predicted by organizational commitment as compared to employee engagement. I'm not sure if that's something you guys are familiar with, but if you are, I just wanted your kind of quick thoughts.
So Andrew, it might be helpful for the audience to, if you would define the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we see is that the order is that commitment leads to engagement. So it's not that they're unrelated, they actually are related. It's just a matter of hierarchy. So what comes first? And the difference is best kind of thought of, at least for me, when I think, okay, when I've put in discretionary effort, long nights, extra hours, just worked hard at some objective. Why did I do that? Well, I did it not because I was engaged. I did it because I was committed. And as a result, yeah, I was engaged, but it wasn't the driving force. It was more of an outcome. So that's one thing that kind of distinguishes the two, but it's not to say they're unrelated or engagement's not important.
Well, and again, when I just think of the word commitment, when I commit to something, that means I'm going to do it. I'm going to be there. I'm going to do it, and it matters to me. And if I just think about what you just said, Andrew, as well as what Hilda said, it really is that ongoing and consistent effort, and that we really care about, whether it's the culture, the employee experience. I mean, we all know there's a ton of terms out there that are different, kind of different variations of what we're talking about. But I think this has been great input so far. So thank you, you all. In terms of how do you make it happen? Because that's what we really want the conversation to be about. You know, and you have another comment in the chat, Andrew, about clear growth roadmaps and promotion criteria. So the two things that strike me about that is, again, those two things really marry performance and satisfaction, because growth and promotion happens as a result of good performance, and whether it's a chicken or the egg, really contributes to that kind of satisfaction that that employees and team members want. So again, if we're doing both of those, we're making something happen for the employee. And I guess the other thing I was thinking about it is, both of these things are, part of the basics. I mean, this isn't, it's not rocket science to talk about providing a roadmap for growth, or what does it take to advance. So we've known about this stuff for quite a long time. And so the question is, are we really doing it? And my experience has been, it's varied from manager to manager within organizations. But again, I think in a lot of ways, subscribing to and committing to the basics make things happen. So what do others think about that? Either kind of using some of the tried and true basics. What do you see working in that regard? And for others on the call, don't be shy, jump in and tell us a little bit about how you're balancing performance and satisfaction, or whatever you'd like to contribute to the conversation.
And while we're waiting for others to gather their thoughts or come off mute, I'd like to springboard off of Andrew's thoughts on commitment. When you're committed to something, you're invested. There's something in it for you. And so how do you bring that out for people? And there are different things that can lead into it. One is having a shared mission and vision. And companies who really do a good job of making that mission clear and helping others to know whatever your role is in the organization, how that feeds into the mission, how that feeds into the results, how that feeds into the success is step one. I think there are some roles that are naturally more given to that, like Hilda in sales. You probably know how sales directly relates to the success of the organization, and your messaging, your marketing is probably pretty well aligned with whatever that mission is of what you're trying to accomplish. There might be other roles that are more, if you will, supportive or administrative, and they don't always understand, like, how does my accounting role feed into the mission of, let's say you're in pharmaceuticals and you have a mission to eradicate a specific disease, but helping people to understand where they fit in the efforts of the whole is certainly one step toward the right commitment.
I think you're spot on, Rhonda. I don't want to take this over here, so I'll let other people chime in. But yeah, it seems to be a matter of, is there a shared commitment to a set of goals, values, principles that are bigger than any one individual?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've seen and worked with a couple of organizations on is getting everybody on the same page in the way that you just described, Andrew, is a bit more of a challenge if you're hybrid, if you're remote. And I think it was a challenge before to get people on the same page. But I think that now, with all of the things that have changed about work in the last couple of years, it really has become kind of just more layers of complexity to how do you get a consistent message out, and how do you know that people are in fact believing the message and engaged with the message? So I think that that's some of the things where what comes to mind for me is one, the consistency, two, and I think that it might be easy for the rest of this conversation to say, well, everything does relate to commitment, because unless you're committed, you're not doing it. So you have to be doing the stuff. But it is everything from leaders being more real, and admitting mistakes. And I just saw this book by Adam Grant, and I think it's one of his more recent, maybe the most recent book. It's called Think Again. And one of the things, the premise for the book is, we all have our beliefs, we all know what we think, we all like to stick with what we think. And more, because of the degree of change and complexity that's out there, a skill that's really important to have is thinking again, reconsidering your point of view, reconsidering, in a sense, the direction you've committed to. And I think that there's a number of practical implications for that. But if we're talking about employee satisfaction, and how do you create an environment where people feel like it's okay to think again, where it's okay to say, I said this, and having thought about it, I'm thinking about it a little different. Because when we think about how do you create an open environment, how do you create a place where people want to and feel that it's safe to exchange ideas, I mean, that's one of the basic premises of psychological safety, is that you can express a concern or a difference of opinion, or maybe change your point of view without there being any type of being penalized for it, or feeling like, well, that's held against you in some way. That we know in the best teams, it's common to be able to change your mind and think again, so to speak. So I think that becomes a very specific behavior, if you will, that as leaders we can demonstrate. I mean, it's one thing we've all heard people say in brainstorming sessions, well, there are no stupid ideas. I know I've been guilty of rolling my eyes after saying that. But the point is to really introduce ideas like thinking again as a way of promoting not just psychological safety, but that's how innovation happens. Everybody doesn't have a genius idea and just right out of the box. It does take massaging and rethinking. So that may have been a little bit of a rabbit hole. I hope not. But I think that since that's something I've been reading, just started reading, I wanted it to share not only the reference, but I think it's a great behavior. So this chat is pretty quiet. I don't know if that's me or you, but good book related to this is Black Box Thinking. Okay, thank you, Gabby, for that. Do you see it in your organization at all? Have you done anything in regard to it?
Sorry, yeah, I hope I don't have a loss in here. I'm quite new to HR, so but I will hopefully try to help set up a culture of growth mindset and experimentation, and it's okay to try things. But yeah, the black box thinking I've just read, a bit long, but it is about how we learn from mistakes and how to experiment. And obviously, as you said, leadership should show this so that people know it's safe.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. And it really is a matter of role modeling. I think that it's easy enough for leaders to say stuff, and I think employees and their teams are waiting to see, is this real? Can I really say and do those things and feel, safe, comma, respected, comma, that my point of view really matters and I'm not being judged. And just removing as much judgment as possible, I think, is another thing that leads to satisfaction, because that's when people are going to feel like they can take a risk and step out. Rhonda, why don't we go to the next slide?
I'd like to offer one more thing before we move on. And, the overarching ask of employees right now in terms of satisfaction is they want to know that their employer and their manager, they care about them. And that comes in the form of well-being. It comes in the form of wanting to feel seen, heard, and appreciated. And a lot of the things that we've been talking about touch on 5 drivers, universal drivers of human behavior, whether they are leaning in, interested, engaged, and committed to the organization, or whether they're reeling back on their heels, not really engaged, and maybe even thinking about heading out the door. And so if we think about how employees want to know that you care, we have packaged it into a model, and it's the CARES model. So if you think about just these 5 things, it may help you in your organization think about places you can start to improve or keep employee satisfaction. So the CARES model stands for C for certainty. Are you giving them certainty about their position, certainty about their vision, certainty about their role in the organization, certainty about what they're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis, certainty about who you are? Autonomy. Autonomy comes in a lot of forms, and people can either like a lot of it or not like a lot of it. We know micromanagers is one of the statistics that Jay shared, where micromanagement tends to lead people to disengage and maybe leave. Relationships. How connected do they feel to the organization? How connected do they feel to your mission? How connected do they feel to other people? Equality, a sense of fairness and how they're being treated. And this really comes in terms of burnout as well. Are you over relying on certain people or certain departments to get things done where it's not fair? Is the promotion, is the career advancement, career opportunities accessible to everyone? And then status or standing, how valued and appreciated do they feel within the organization? So I hope that just thinking those 5 things gives you something to chew on as you look around your organization and see, well, where might we make some changes?
Okay.
There we go.
Sounds good. So here's a list we put together of some of the things that we think lead to both employee satisfaction that ultimately supports performance. And when you look at this, you can see that we've touched on a few of these, and you have also with your input into the chat and your comments. So thanks for those. If anybody sees anything on here, either that they're doing or they want to comment about, please jump in. One of the things that isn't on here directly, but when we think about the lack of some of these things, unclear expectations, not transparent communication, a lack of feedback, lack of empathy. What that leads to ultimately for people, and Gabby just asked a question, so we'll get to that in a moment. But a lack of a lot of these things lead to stress, and to some extent, anxiety. Things that bug people when people are just uncertain. So it's in degrees, and we certainly aren't saying if you don't do these things, everybody's stressing out. But knowing that, and if you're looking at any of the same articles that I'm seeing on LinkedIn and in any of the business publications, even in the Wall Street Journal. They're talking about how one of the things that's really leading to people looking for different jobs is the stress they experience at work, how hybrid environments create stress, so on and so forth. So I think as a rule of thumb, if you can take a step back and see, this is something that I think is creating stress for my team, or uncertainty for my team, and they might even be bringing it to your attention. But try to again get a bead on what's creating uncertainty, stress, ambiguity, any of those things for your team, and what can you do to reduce them? Because the more you can do to create an environment where folks are feeling not stressed, where they're feeling like their concerns are at least recognized and acknowledged. I mean, you don't have to take care of everything. You can't take care of everything, but you can find out what's going on and acknowledge those things. And I think that goes a long way to folks feeling supported and contributing to that degree of satisfaction or employee experience that we're all looking at. Does anybody have a thought or comment about this issue of reducing uncertainty and ambiguity in the environment? And if anybody's doing anything to get at that, that would be great. So, because I think it's a big thing. And any of the organizations I work with, that's one of the first things I look for is, where is there a lack of clarity or uncertainty or inconsistency? Because I think it all contributes to ambiguity and stress.
Yeah, Jay, that's one of the biggest dissatisfiers especially even during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic as well. Let's just take, for example, the return to office. The ambiguity of, are we or aren't we? If we are, when? If we are, what does that look like? How many days? Is it for everyone, etc.? And there's an old saying that the lack of a decision is worse than even a bad decision. People just need closure in their brain so that they know what to do. And when they have ambiguity, they can freeze because they don't know what to do. They can fight, they start to complain, or they have flight and they leave. So don't underestimate the importance of certainty and resolving ambiguity. Even if you don't have the answer today, let them know. Okay, folks, we don't have the answer today. We will have an advanced, we'll work on this and we're going to let you know what we've come up with in 2 weeks. At least they have a time point where they're going to get more information, because people just even giving them baby steps to move forward is more helpful than to say nothing or to leave it open-ended. Gabby, you asked to define authentic relationships. And I think a lot of people have different ways of defining that, but congruency is, I think, the biggest thing, at least the way that I define it. And what do you mean by that? Well, are your words matching your behavior? So we've seen this all before. Senior leadership saying, we have an open door policy. Come and see me with any of your issues. That's perfectly fine. Okay, that might be true, but it might take forever to get on their schedule to see if you can even come and talk to them. The door is not always open. It's mostly closed. And even when you go to see them, you really don't feel heard. And so there's several things within that authenticity that are incongruent. Authentic relationships really come from setting expectations and from a place of empathy. Authentic relationships is a give and take. I guess you could have an authentic relationship if someone has all the power and the other person knows it and will always be just compliant in that relationship. But that's clear from day one. More authentic relationships, though, foster the opportunity to temporarily pause your own agenda and opinion simply walk around to the back of the chair and look at an issue from the perspective of the other person. That doesn't mean you're required to change your thoughts or your opinion. It doesn't mean that you are required to do as they ask. It doesn't mean that you're required to agree. What it does, though, is gives you more information to make more informed decisions. And going back to the top of the slide here, it fosters that employees feel heard, seen, and acknowledged and considered. I'd love to hear how other people think about authenticity in relationships.
You know, I'm going to jump in and add one that has become, I think, again, more prominent during the pandemic, and that is being vulnerable. Now, the last couple of years, particularly, I think the first year of COVID, was really quite demanding for everybody. And I think one of the issues and skills of being a manager is how to be appropriately vulnerable and how to really bring your humanity to work in a way that, as somebody said earlier, it involves being a role model. So I've certainly seen, read and seen it, directly with folks that I work with, that one of the biggest challenges for managers during that time was how to be human, how to be vulnerable if they were having an issue, and even in how they responded to the issues of folks that they were working with. And the vulnerability and being open and genuine, it doesn't have to be a big drama. I mean, it's really just being human and real. The other morning, I was on a call with a new client with people I really didn't know very well. We were just getting to know one another, and one of the partners says, "Well, I'm not going to come on camera because I didn't have a chance to." Freshen up after my workout this morning. I'm kind of a mess. And so his colleagues teased him, and I just said, oh, come on, Todd, we're developing our relationship here. You can be vulnerable. So he comes on, his hair's a mess, he's in a tank top, and we joked about it for a minute, but I mean, in a sense, to me, that was being authentic. He was being real. He said, yeah. Here I am after my workout, and it's not like he's the only one who's working out. So being authentic can take on many different faces, and sometimes your hair is a mess, and it's not like the other person's is always perfect. So that's my contribution around authenticity. It's and being vulnerable. And at the end of the meeting, I just said that, thanks for being vulnerable. So anyhow, any other comments about authentic, or since we're getting pretty close to wrapping up, anything else you'd like us to address specifically? Question about anything that we've said, or are we all good?
Can I ask, if that's okay?
Please.
I'm going to work with a technology group, and there's a lot of change, and within 3 years you need to have upskill completely, constantly, and you don't even know what the skills in the future will be in 2 years time, 3 years time. So how can I help bring clarity in that sense? The company is trying to change the way we operate. We know we have to reskill a lot of people, and so it's really hard to. The only clarity we can bring is that change is constant, and you need to be happy with this. Any tips? Any extra thoughts?
Well, thanks for your question, Gabby. And over the years, I've worked a lot with technical folks, with IT folks and accounting folks. And you're right about who knows what it's going to look like in 18 months. But when you look at, what are the characteristics that are really involved with being successful in those kinds of roles, and I think problem solving is clearly, it's a skill that you have to have if you're really going to be, I think, successful in a technical role. Interaction skills. Potentially, again, technical people oftentimes don't have, great interaction skills, and not to generalize or stereotype anybody. Sorry if I was inappropriate there. But, aside from changing technical skills, like what's going to be, happening in 18 months, there's a set of performance characteristics that I think go along with just about any role. So one of the things that you can do is pay attention to what are some of those performance characteristics and help people, you have to do some kind of assessment. What are those non-technical types of characteristics where they may need to develop? I think, again, they're to some extent are probably project opportunities or special assignment opportunities, if you will, that are still happening and concurrent with the current skills. So I think that there's, you can leverage what's going on today, and again, unless that person, and if that person is an absolute superstar, then they're probably having a good time as it is, and I would hope you're able to take advantage of what they have to offer. So that's how I would approach that, and we're getting close to the end. So Rhonda, do you want to address that or anything else?
Yeah, so Gabby, where I've seen at least the folks that I work with be most successful is establishing a talent optimization strategy that aligns with your current business strategy. And that allows you not only to help everyone on the team, or at least a large portion of the team, understand where they fit and contribute to the larger goals of the organization, but as things change over time, it is a neutral tool that helps you communicate how the business is changing, how the deployment of people within the organization is changing, and how they fit into that change. The biggest thing that makes me twitch are these reactive, if you will, or perceived reactive headcount changes that take people by surprise. It never goes well for the people, and they leave or they stay with animosity towards how it went down, how it's treated. And if you have a really solid talent optimization strategy, and we help clients to be able to visually portray what that looks like, people have certainty about where their role is, they have certainty about where the company is headed. And again, as things change, you just adjust the visual a little bit, but people still know that they have a place. And because you have a talent optimization strategy that aligns with your business strategy, you can upskill along the way rather than just in time or reactively. And actually, that might be a really good topic for one of our future webinars, is how to align a talent optimization strategy with your business strategy in order to help people stay with the organization and not get scared that they might not fit and leave before that actually happens, or that it probably wasn't going to happen in the first place. Did that help, Gabby?
Yes, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us and sticking with us throughout our session today. And our next session is going to get into, again, we hear the term connectivity a lot, and people are looking for connections at work. So I think we've touched on this a little bit today, but next time we're going to take a deeper dive into strengthening connections at work. We talked a little bit about authentic relationships today, developing relationships in the hybrid environment, and that's a little different for things that are when things are remote. And we'll get a little bit more into psychological safety and how that really lays the foundation for great relationships.